Good evening, everyone. I'm Dennis Weil. I'm the Dean of the Institute of Design, and I'm very excited to welcome you to the talk by Professor Ezio Manzini here at ID in our new building. The reason we are so excited about having Professor Manzini here is that it really fits well with his work fits very well with the expansive definition of design that we aspire to and are known for. We are the sole graduate-only professional design school in the US. Our focus is not on forming designers, but on building the design competency for many people from many backgrounds and going into many different roles. 2/3 of our graduates do not have design in their title. They go into consulting, civic sector, healthcare, and many startups. I think our focus on that actually stems back all the way to our founder, Moholy-Nagy, who felt that it was very important to train non-designers in design, as he described the role of the designer to ensure that society has access to the maximum use of constructive abilities, that's what he called it, to solve its problems. Basically, design when everyone designs, to quote from the title from Professor Manzini's book from 2015. With this, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jessica Jacobs, who will lead us through the program tonight. Jessica is in our PhD program, and she leads the focus on activism and impact as part of our design intersections this year. Jessica, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Hi, everyone. As Dennis said, I'm Jessica Jacobs. I just started the PhD in design program here at the Institute of Design. In my other life, I'm also the interim chair of the design department at Columbia College Chicago. And I'm really interested in issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in design practices. So I'm very excited to introduce Ezio tonight and lead the panel discussion. Before I introduce him, I just want to say this is the first of a series of events that we have this year as part of, as Dennis said, our Design Intersections programming. And so we're going to have 3 more lectures throughout the next month, and this will all culminate in a conference in May 22nd and 23rd. As Dennis said, one of the areas that I'm leading in that is called Activism and Impact. Some other things we're exploring are entrepreneurship and emerging technologies and leadership in the new economy. And we're inviting designers, executives, strategists, policymakers, and entrepreneurs to explore emergent practices for activating networks and designing infrastructures that lead to large-scale impact. And so Ezio's talk definitely leads into this idea of collective action and activating networks. So with that said, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Ezio and then turn the presentation over to him. Ezio Manzini is the founder of the DESIS Network, an international network of design for social innovation and sustainability. He is the author of Politics of the Everyday, which I highly recommend, and we have some samples of here for you as well, and that's what he's talk about tonight. And then he's also written Design When Everybody Designs, an introduction to design for social innovation. He is Distinguished Professor of Design for Social Innovation at Elisava-Design School and Engineering in Barcelona, Honorary Professor at the Politecnico di Milano, and Guest Professor at Tongji University and Jiangnan University. So we're very honored to have him here today as he discusses the issues in this new book, Politics of the Everyday. And I'll just turn it over to you to take it away.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Thank you to Jessica, and thank you to Dennis. And I'm happy to be one of the first that give a public lecture in these beautiful places. And there is also something that's very new also for me, because I'm here, as Jessica said, because I'm starting to present my new book. Sorry, it's not marketing, but it's also marketing. And I did only one presentation, so two presentations in New York, but I'm still at the beginning. So I'm still checking how it's better to present and what to say. So I'm very curious to see what the feedback will be. And thanks to make questions. Also, we will have some discussion, and this will be very useful for me to understand. On the top of this, maybe someone of you, maybe not the youngest, but the oldest, have wrote book. So it happens that when you present the book, you are already on the next one. So you are, in reality, you are not really presenting the book. You are presenting what at that point you are thinking of what you thought writing the book. So this is where we are more or less. And finally, we have not said how much I have to talk, but I think 40 minutes. And when it's 30 minutes, please, Jessica, tell me, because sometimes I lose. And I really want not to make it too long, to have a space for the conversation. So this is the title. And I'm not going to explain, because I hope that it's a little bit catching, but I hope it will be clear going on. So there are 8 short chapters. The first one is not so much the result of my experience as a researcher, because the core of what I will present come from something that I did in the past decade. It's more something that is my experience as a human being. And I consider that I am a human being based in Europe or in Italy. So it's possible that what I'm saying is seen by this very special point of view that could be slightly or much different from yours, but this could be also an opportunity to discuss. To say what I want to say could start from many different places, different point of view, different topic. I start from this one because it's very related to what I want to say afterwards. And we can describe the multiple crises in which our societies are by many points of view. The one of this spreading of loneliness in between people, in my view, is important, and it's important by many different points of view, probably much more than normally people think. So this is just to give you the flavor, but it's impressive. So in Britain, they say make a research, and they find many interesting results from this research. One of these is that there are a lot of people, mainly elderly people, that do not talk with anybody for more than 1 month. Why this issue of loneliness is so important, not only for the obvious that we are social animals, so to be alone is very sad psychologically, but also practically, because if you live alone, if you are a single or if you're a single elderly, whatever happened to you, you don't have anybody nearby that can help you. And, but also, as we will see, for some other reason, when you are alone, you feel to be more fragile. And therefore, I think that this kind of unmotivated fear that is spreading, for sure in Europe, but for what I understand, also here in America, is largely motivated by the fact that people being alone feel to be much more exposed to some risk that could be real or not. As a matter of fact, for instance, in Italy, has been made an inquiry just now, it's been published yesterday, and 46% of the people feel to be in danger. Now, you have to imagine, in Italy, probably you know there are some problems, there are a lot of problems, but it's one place where you're pretty sure everywhere. So why the people should feel in danger? When the statistic says that the crime is in reduction. So we have this paradoxical condition of having less and less crimes and more people that feel to be in some way in danger. My interpretation is that there is a link with the idea of being alone, with the idea of not having anybody around, and so to be more exposed. And on the top of this, these people that is alone, including the elderly, are always connected, as many of you in this moment. And being connected, you know what happened. You enter in these bubbles, in this filter of communication in which you find only the people that are with similar mind, and you start to enter in a bubble of anger. And this is a frustration that's turned in being a way to be a hater. And this, as you know, is very grave because at the end of the story, what happens is that the people vote. The people take political positions. And the political positions are largely related to the way in which people feel. And in Europe, at least, I don't know, here I don't want to say, but in Europe there are those people that I put together that are representative of the party, that are populist, and they are making their fortune on the fear of people, creating fear, generating conditions for fear. And they gained a lot. So unfortunately, they are the ones that in this moment are in the wind of how things are going. I think that there is a connection in between the widespread connectivity and all the stories that I said. Because this gives the idea to be in a metropolis. No, it's fake, it's not true. It's only to give the idea that we are in a deeply in a metropolitan area. Because when we started to have the different digital way to connect, the key word has been that this helps the disintermediation. So you eliminate the middleman. And many people, including myself, said this is good because you can reorganize things in a much more direct way. You eliminate the bureaucracy and many other considerations like this. That has been good. But we all forgot that the middlemen are also the parties, are also the labors, are also in Italy the church and its own organization, are also all the hundreds of thousands of organizations that we had and that made the Italian and European society so alive. So the interconnection in between the people, if you become the normal people that are more and more alone, with some boss somewhere without anything in between, is what generates, on one side, this kind of populistic situation. So I think that the connectivity using this capability to disintermediate, generate the melting of the traditional forms. And the melting of traditional forms bring to something that can be seen as a kind of social desertification. I like a lot the metaphor of the desertification, talking about the society. And this means, and we go to the second chapter, the way in which we can describe society in many different ways. One way that I like, and this is in my view useful for the sake of what we want to talk about, is to see society as an ecosystem. And as all the ecosystem is healthy when there is a huge variety, a high number of entities. So the healthiest is the ecosystem, the most diversity you can find. This in biology, everybody knows. So defending the biodiversity is to maintain the resilience of the biological ecosystem. But making the necessary differences, this is valuable also for the society. So a society is healthy if inside the society there are many different kinds of social forms that exist, coexist, have synergy, a conflict, that they can have as an ecosystem, many different kinds of relationships, and all together create a system that is alive. And as you can imagine, if what I was said in the previous chapter, we have a reduction of the social forms to have a kind of simplification of having individual people in their own home dealing with the TV or now with the social media in direct relationship with some kind of boss that is somewhere. This is only one way to organize the society, and the more that we go in this direction, the more the society is beyond being tendentially non-democratic, is also fragile. So it's a very risky condition, the condition in which you have this kind of desertification, reduction of the complexity of the society. Therefore, for the biological system, when you have a system that is in the transforming itself toward a desertified one, there are some strategy to regenerate the system. That means to reintroduce some form, some entity that make it better. And the same should be also for the society. So what we should do is to regenerate our society, recreating some form that are some social form, that we can call it some kind of communities. So we should try to multiply the number, the diversity of the social form. So the more there is complexity, the better it is. We should, at the same time, to create an habitat that means normative, basic culture, basic language that create conditions to have a social form to thrive. But we cannot do it as it was in the past. So we cannot say, oh, we turn and we go back to the social form of the past, simply because the past is past. And it was totally diverse from today. So the kind of social form that was effective and capable to live and thrive in the past century could not live and thrive in the new century when we have a highly connected society. So the issue is, what does it mean, if I am correct, to regenerate the ecosystem when the elements that we can find in this ecosystem are so much transformed by the fact that we live in a, not in the society with the connectivity of the last century, but the society with the connectivity of this century. And here we enter in the third. Of course, whatever we say today, we cannot escape to consider the global scale. And so we could say, but maybe how we can talk about ecosystems that are always so local, and what happened at the ecosystem level, and a world that become global. The global dimension of the world can be discussed adopting many different points of view, very many different points of view. The one that I like is the one proposed by Anthony Giddens many years ago. Anthony Giddens is a very famous sociologue. And for me, he says something very interesting and hyper interesting for who is, as many of us, is designer. Because he said that at the end of the day, the way in which we can say what globalization is not to talk something that happened at the scale of the big map that we said, but what happened at our scale. So at the local scale, globalization means that your life can be influenced by something that happens miles and miles away. And in turn, even though this could be less evident, your daily life, the choices that you do in your life can influence something that can happen far, far away. Therefore, we could have a discussion about the globalization that instead of talking about the whole planet, take a point of view that is the point of action of somebody that is in a certain context with his own body. And I like to call it a kind of hyper-local, where the hyper is a really small local, because practically it is coincident with the body of the people, but at the same time is hyper because from where I am, so from the point of view on the world, from the point of action on the world that I have, I can influence and be influenced by something that happened very far away. So, in my view, whatever we propose, you remember that the goal was to try to imagine new social forms. The new social forms are human beings that interact, but they interact in a space that is this hyperlocal space. And the hyperlocal space is such that the dimensions are not the traditional scale. When I was young, even before we say that you have the knife, the home, and the city, and the region, and each one was a different scale. I think that for some application you can maintain that kind of scale. But the local is not small. The local is what is possible to do and what you can receive when you are in a place. And this is not anymore, as you know better than me in this place, defined by proximity. Even though proximity is very important for several reasons, because in any case you have a body and your body is somewhere, and every time that you have a problem of care, you have to have a problem of proximity. So given the social form are based on a human being that decide to do something or not to do something, the way in which you can imagine to rebuild the social form cannot escape from considering what is the point of view and what is the point of action and what are the potentiality that somebody as me call the field of action that is in front of these people. In this hyperlocal, we have interactions that are creating a social space, but that is not rooted in a, inverted comma, naturally in a place as it was in the past. And that is, as we said before, disintermediated potentially. So you remember, we are here discussing how to regenerate social form, considering that we are talking about individual, because the process of individualization is arrived very, very far, that live in this hybrid space that is at the same time physical, and that we are all facing complex issues that are difficult or impossible to reduce at a simplicity, and having all this together, the question is how can we or they act together to regenerate what we call a new social form. So now I move to something that is my personal experience. So the discussion on if I have no experience, we can say, okay, this is the problem, how we generate social form. And we can start the discussion. But I can offer my experience that maybe is not the solution, but could be an element of possible contribution. And the element of possible contribution comes from what in the last 15 years in Europe, a lot, in America a little bit, has been called social innovation. So using or not using this term social innovation, the practical story is that in this last decade, a lot of people, not the majority, unfortunately, but nevertheless not really only tiny minority, many people started to act in a way that was not foreseen in the mainstream way of thinking. And this we can see in different ways and different intensity, but not only in Europe, not only in America, but practically everywhere. So for instance, I've been quoted that I coordinate, no, do not coordinate anymore, but in any case, I'm linked to a network, Design for Social Innovation, that exists in China, in Africa, and whatever, even though social innovation in China is not exactly the same that we can have in Europe or in America. Nevertheless, we can see people that, as opposed to the idea of living alone in your little house, choose to collaborate, to share something. We can see people that do something to try to revitalize the streets in which they are. You can see it in the Makers and Fab Lab movement, people that try to reorganize form of production, that consider different way of imagining what is a company. We have the big, fantastic story about new food networks, from the zero-mile food to the food co-op and whatever. We can have a new idea of welfare, that is the collaborative welfare. This is an official term in Europe, in which it's not only who is served and who is served, but how people collaborate to help each other. And so on, so on, so on. Altogether, this is an image that I have used since at least 8 years. But 8 years ago, I had to explain one by one what were these different little stories. Now I'm sure that whoever look at it know what it is about. Maybe do not know one or two because maybe the terminology is not the same, but it's something that became normal. So in these 10 years, we discovered that so many, in our language, service idea emerged, because each one of them is a service idea. And this service idea starts from the necessity to solve some problem and see some people that decide to rediscover the value of collaborating to solve a problem. So this is the element they call this service social innovation, because they are very diverse, but in general they have one point in common, that people choose to do something with others together, to collaborate. And so the key word that keeps them together is how collaboration can be the basis of a way to solve some problems that otherwise would be impossible or difficult to solve. And so we developed the idea. Now when I say we, I mean not only me and my group. I mean this has been very spread in all the design community that has worked on this issue. So it appeared that social innovation was a number of service ideas, and that design for social innovation would be to do what is possible with the design tools to support and to make it more lively and capable to live and to develop in time. And on this, another little marketing, I did one book that had been published 3.5 years ago. And that one was a book that represented where I was, but where we was as a community. So as a designer, we say, okay, design is whatever design can do to support this social innovation. But the most important point is that the social innovation was seen mainly as a collection of many different projects. So very solution-oriented. And 5 years later, it's exactly this solution-oriented that, for me at least, entered in crisis. And at a certain point, I started to use the term solutionism for this. So imagine that the huge issue that we are facing could be divided in single problems, and each problem can be solved, and afterward, the very general solution will be the integration of so many different individual solutions. Now, with all the respect for the fact that we have to find solutions and they have to work, the reality has shown us that is not enough. Now, again, I tell the European story, up to you to translate. But for us in Italy, where we have had so many interesting cases of social innovation in this way, or in England that has been the Hollywood of the social innovation intended in this way, with Nesta, with Young Foundation, with the New Economy Foundation, so entire group with hundreds of researchers that were working in this direction, and afterward people vote and vote Brexit. So it's clear that that approach is fundamental, but it arrived to a limit. And for me, and this is the challenge, is the limit is in the solutionism. The limit is the solutionism, the idea of solving many little problems, that is important. Do not give a very general story. Do not enter in the arena of the big discussion of the society. Do not make people dream something that could be a possible future. So the paradox is that the people as me, and maybe some of you, see in what is said until now a kind of, for me at least, the only light on the end of the tunnel, so as a direction where it is possible to imagine the needed new civilization. But this is seen by me and maybe some of you. Normally people, maybe they practice day by day some of these activities that we've seen, but when they say what will be the future, they do not have an idea. So they're not capable to put together all those ideas and to have to connect the dots and to have the very general idea. So from that moment to this one, There has been this kind of reflection that in some way is summarized in this book. And from the title, you see that there is one point that emerged. That is the political dimension of what we did and what we do. So for a long period, I talk for myself, but I'm sure that it's valuable for many people, we discussed about highly political issue without never quoting. Then there was political. We discussed a lot about something that could change the balance in power without naming the power. So the issue about power has been not the electrical power, the political power has been largely outside our screen. And I think that this has been one of the limits. So the point in which I arrived to with this book is, let's try to imagine in which way, when we do what I explained before, we are doing some political action. And not only me, but I adopted this terminology to call the politics of the everyday, not the politics of the party, the politics of the big P. They, in my view, exist even if it is in crisis in this moment, but it's hyper necessary. But to see in which way we can give the political meaning to what happened when people organize a food co-op, when people organize a co-living, when people organize a maker place, etc., etc. And what we learned, but to understand the political meaning, we have to go back to the hyperspace, to the hyperlocal, because the risk is that when I start, especially for the people of my generation, to talk about these things, me and many people, to go back to the idea of community of the past, to the idea of what has been the way to make politics that has been traditional, when maybe we have to try to learn from what happens from these social innovation cases, what are some element of the new way in which the social form appear. So very quickly, I can give you some flash on what I think when now I try to propose to use the term community today or to use the term collaborative network. The very general term is that they are communities that are light. The community of the past was very heavy. The old community in the village was a place where people was born. The 90% of them spent their whole life inside, doing everything inside that community. It was very difficult to get out the mentality, the structure of life that was proper of that community. I am not particularly homesick of that communities, but even if somebody could have some nostalgia of that community, in my view, they will not come back. The new community, I call them light community, and try to give to the term light a positive meaning. In many places in Italy, I don't know here, lightness is more or less as a shallow, as superficial. I like to say that light could be light and very deep in some way. My reference is, for who maybe knows, there is a fantastic book of Italo Calvino that there is called, in Italian it's called the American Lesson, in English it's called, I don't remember now, where there is an entire chapter on the quality of lightness. So I think that in a fluid world like this one, we have to be capable to be interpreted of what are the possibility to be intense, deep, etc., dealing with some organizations that are light. And just to give an idea, the light community, first of all, are intentional. So people choose to enter. Secondly, they are open. So it's not an identity, a community of identity that is with a very clear border. I am inside, you are outside. And this is fundamental politically because very unfortunately, where the most, the mainstream in the neoliberal mentality was not talking about this because Mrs. Thatcher said there is nothing as a society, there are only individuals. So that one says there are no community. But the bloody anti-neoliberal that are hidden neoliberal in a different way, they are re-talking about community. So, but they are talking about an hypothetical community of the past that is based on strong, the Italian first. And therefore, it's a community of the me against the others. This kind of community, when they work well, are very open. So they are a formal group, a social form, but open. They are reversible. So you can enter, you can get out. Well, for instance, also the intentional community, when I was young, the hippie community, it was a kind of religion. If you enter in the community, you are a sinner if you go out. So in this case, they are much more negotiated in what is possible to do. And what people do is negotiated. So it's not everything predefined as in the traditional, both the very traditional one and the intentional community of the last century, in which, given an ideology, everything descends. But there are a kind of common basic intention that is very vague, and afterward we can have a discussion on what if it is a co-housing, what we want to do together, if it is a food co-op, in which way we will organize ourselves. It is project-oriented because the people are together to develop a project. So they are the example, as was the title of the other book, the kind of the everybody designs. In a world that is a world that could have a kind of community only digital, this community have a reference with the place. And to have a reference of the place, given that the place do not exist per se, it exists because there is the community that take care of the place, so they have to find motivation to talk about this place. And the motivation to talk about the place is fundamental, even though they can meet also in Facebook, in WhatsApp, or in more sophisticated platform, but at a certain point, if there is an element of care asks to be face-to-face, in between people in between people and a physical place. We discover that the community have to have the power to make happen what they decide. And if at the beginning a community could be a community of peer, kind of guerrilla gardeners that squat a land and start a community garden, but after a while it's not possible to work only in this way, but you have to integrate somebody that institutionalize some element. I did, not by chance, the example of the community garden because it's very well known. At the beginning, there was a group of guerrilla gardeners, but after 30 years, they still live. And they live because they have had a kind of compromise with the institution, that in the New York case, they call the Green Thumb. And so they are hybrid. They are not homogeneous, also by the point of view of the institutional position of the people that participate. And finally, it's very important, now in Italy and many places in Europe, the community that I dislike, and you understood, are saying whatever is culture, whatever is knowledge is non-trusty because it's the elite. This community, to do something, have to integrate different knowledge. And so they are not of peer that have the same kind of knowledge, but they have to integrate also somebody that brings into the community what is necessary. And in between the different knowledge, even though many of those start without formal designers, we can have also, and more we have now, the participation of some professional expert designer that brings some contribution by different point of view. I think that I have to accelerate a little bit. So we have people that are active, that they have a collaborative attitude. They go together because they want to get a result. And in the way in which they go together, given that they collaborate, they generate some social value that are, at the end of the day, the one that reweave the society. That was our intention. We can try to extract a kind of vision. So before I said, if we put all these different stories together, it's not so obvious that you have a vision beyond the little stories. We can try to work on a possible vision. And what I like, at least one aspect of this possible scenario, is to imagine a society that gives to all the possible actors the possibility to be catalyzed and to move in some way towards sustainability. And here the story is linked to the story of the environmental and social sustainability, and the fact that we need to mobilize practically all the social forces to go in that direction. And so the society can be imagined as a collective intelligence that has the capability to become a collective design intelligence, because there is something that has to be designed. So what does it mean to create a social learning process that not coordinate in a mechanical way, but offer as an ecosystem that offers certain conditions for many different positions to thrive and to do something and to use a human capability in a certain direction. So what does it mean to create result-oriented networks that, as we said before, include the competencies and power, and that are capable to learn from experience? So when you have a system like this, it means that it's a kind of social intelligence. And here there could be a discussion that we can do. What are the relationships in between the way in which I arrive to this notion of social intelligence in relation to the artificial intelligence? So if and how the artificial intelligence can be a component of this journey toward, in my view, what is needed. What is needed is a social intelligence. That means an intelligence that is capable to use the social capability and resources, and in some way to be used to improve the quality of life of who participate. In which way this can be project-oriented? So what we have to design. I like a lot this definition of Amartya Sen, that when he wrote it, he was not thinking to design, but I think that could be for us one of the things that maybe you can write on one of these white walls, that maybe many of you know Amartya Sen and know this his position. His position is that there are some possibility, a kind of field of possibility or field of action for the people, and we live in a field of action. Therefore, what we have to do for the people is not to try to understand what they really want, but what we have to do is to try to give them more freedom to do what they want. And this is the shift that Amartya Sen introduced. It's fantastic because it's a totally different position from what was when I was studying this story, in which we were told that you have to look to the people, understand what are their own will and their wish and their need, and afterward you, the design team, realize the dream of these people. The position of Amartya Sen is nobody can enter totally in the mind of the people, but you can create, in my language of today, will be an environment in which the field of the possibility is larger. And so they have more possibility to express themselves. And in the Amartya Sen language, to express their freedom of being what they want to be and doing what they want to do. I think that this gives a kind of very strong direction for designers. And in one sentence, it could be how to extend the field of action. If in the discussion we want to go on, is what is the field of possibility in relation to the field of action. That are two different things. One is what theoretically will be possible to do for an individual, and what practically I am capable to do, given the limit in my understanding, the limit in my doing. So what we can do is to work in two levels. On one level is to extend the theoretical possibilities, that is mainly, not only, but mainly a technological issue. And the second one is to extend the real field of action, that is what really a person recognizes as viable and recognized to have the possibility to do. And this is mainly because they both are not only a social dimension. And to conclude, what we can do is to imagine a kind of a new infrastructure, and could be a little bit long, but there is a synthesis. We don't know how a sustainable society will be, and luckily we don't know because it's open. But there are some elements that appear sufficiently clear. One element is that we are dealing with a super complex system. And the super complex system, to be dealt with, can have a different attitude. There is the attitude to simplify the complexity and to find the center from which you can try to control, or you can try to bring the complexity in the nodes of the system, to spread the complexity in the system, and to give to the people the possibility to face the complexity at the scale that is acceptable. And I think that this is the very basic idea of whatever is distributed, to try to bring the knowledge, the power of doing things, the power of taking decisions, the more that it is distributed, the possible. And this, Robin Murray explained it very well, why the local is not only because it's nice to give people a little bit of power, but because only the people locally knows a lot. And this is not an option. It's the only way to face complexity. So you see, I hope at least, that there is a kind of convergence in between all the discussion that's moved from what these nice people in social innovation have done, that is in any case local and based on certain combination of physical and digital, and a discussion about how the system should be to be in some way treatable in the perspective of transition towards sustainability. And of course, the more that you have a distributed system, the more it's not only a technical issue. The more it's an issue in which to put it in place, to make it real, you need to have the real participation of the ones that are involved. And of course, in this we can, as an expert designer, do a lot. And to conclude, we can do, as you understood, because I keep, during my discussion, two different levels. One level is the one that we say to work in the community or in the network. So we are part of the group and we co-design something using all the tools and the methodology and the sensitivity that we can have in the co-design. But I would like also to say there is also a design for, because if you design for creating the environment, to create a more favorable habitat for this individual initiative, there is a lot to do as a designer. So designing so being part of the networks as one of the experts that participate to this active result-oriented network, or to be part of other groups, other teams that are creating this environment. And in this we have to, of course, a lot now of methodology, 101, what is the 101 methodology? There. We have at least 101 methodology, also for the co-design. And method, I think that we have to have much more creativity of the one that has been used until now for who has been, as a professional designer, worked in social innovation or for social motivation. We needed to be capable to connect the dots, so to give visions, not only solutions, not only problem solving, but also sense making, that is the other side of the coin, of what we should do. And for me, that I'm Italian, we use this term design culture that has been used practically only by the Italians, but I think that it makes sense. So it's some specific culture that is the one of designer, and even though the system that of people that participate in solving some problem or opening a new opportunity could include many, many others, we, the ones that are expert designers, should bring something that is not only tools, but also a cultural attitude that is modest, but is our contribution to make things better, hopefully. Thank you.